Our jobs, this is a topic I talk about a lot, our jobs are not organized in a democratic way. When you go to work in the morning, whether it's an office, a store, or a factory, you walk into a place where a tiny group of people, the board of directors, that's usually about 15 people in a corporation, who are elected or selected by the major shareholders. Once again, just to remind you, the board of directors, which makes all the basic decisions for every company that matters, 15 people. How do you get to be on the board of directors? You get elected. Elected by whom? By the shareholders. The shareholders get one vote per share they own. So if you own no shares, that's how many votes you have to decide who runs a company. You have no votes. If you have 12 shares, you get 12 votes. If you have 212 million shares, you get 212 million votes. 1% of this country owns 2/3 of the shares. That's the 1% who controls who gets on the board of directors. You have 11 shares of General Motors left to you by your great-grandmother when she died. And I'm happy for you. But your influence over General Motors is the equivalent of mine, and my grandmother had no shares for anybody. Okay? Tiny group of people decide who's on the board of directors. That's why I want to tell all of you that are considering a career of making it to the board of directors, buy lottery tickets. Your odds are better. Right? Okay? Now, that means when you go to work, you enter a fundamentally undemocratic place. You do what you're told. You arrive 9 o'clock. Why? Because that's what you were told. And you sit over there. Why? Because that's what you were told. And you work with this machine because that's what you were told. With this piece of paper because that's what you were told. With this job in mind, with that's what you were told. And at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, you were told, go home, leave whatever you produced here. You may have poured your brain into it and your muscles and your creativity, but it's not yours. You did it. No, you don't get it. Go home. And back tomorrow and do it all again. You schmuck. But we leave that out because we don't want to hurt your feelings. We want you to come back and do it again tomorrow. Okay? You have no power at all. Who decides if the factory you're working in or the office closes? The board of directors. You live with the consequences, which is you don't have a job. You don't have a place to go. What is your power? If you don't have shares, which the vast majority of workers do not have in the companies where they work, then you have no power at all. You live with the consequences, but you have no power. If they decide to use a technology that's very loud and messes up your ears, you're free, which means you can quit and go to another place to work. That same lack of democracy will exist. You have your choice of undemocratic workplaces. That's it. That's why it's so important to feel that you are free. Yeah, sure you're free. Right? So that's a fundamental undemocratic system. And now why is it undercutting political democracy? Because at work, office, factory, or store, that's where most people spend most of their adult lives. What are you talking about? As soon as you're finished with your education, you go to work. Monday to Friday, 5 out of 7 days, the best hours of the day, you're in a fundamentally undemocratic place. And it's driven home to you every day in countless ways. What kind of a democratic political system can exist like this? My view is none. What you're doing is you're actually training people to have no belief in democracy, to have no expectation of democracy. Because that's what you're doing every day. Of course, when you go home to work, you don't from work and you're in your community, your home, your neighborhood, do you think about, let's see, what would be good for our neighborhood? How should we... You don't think like that. Those are not your questions. Those are the questions for the people who run the business. They're the ones who think about what should happen. You just come and do your job and then go home. And go home and get a beer and sit down in front of the TV and shove 2 big pieces of pizza into your face and then go to sleep so you have the energy to do all this fun again in the morning. There's no training for democracy in the community. Of course people aren't democratically motivated. They don't know the first thing about how to run a community because they're never allowed to run the place where they do their work. If we had worker co-ops, if we had an organization of business that was democratically run so that every worker had the responsibility, not just the right, but the responsibility to make all the big decisions. If the board of directors was the whole collection of workers. So you work Monday to Thursday, but Friday when you come to work, you don't do your normal job. You sit around with all the other workers and you decide what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. Because that's what a human being should do. If you did that on the job, you'd be training people for the kind of participatory management that you ask of them in the democratic society. The New York Times wouldn't have to wonder why people don't care about voting, because they're not involved in making any decisions about how the world works. They're fundamentally excluded from it most of the time in most of their adult lives. But they should suddenly flip out and be completely other in the community with political things than they are demanded to be 5 out of 7 days a week on the job. Makes no sense. And any society that wanted politics to be democratic in more than the formalities of it all, the rituals, if you really cared, you would have had long ago to have a debate on the fundamental question, how in the world could we have a political democracy if we sit it on top of an economic system that is so anti-democratic as we've arranged it? There's no way out of this.